Hello and welcome back. We're on to the factory pattern. And this one is really well known, but I think it goes over a lot of people's heads as to how useful it really is. I might be deluded and I may be wrong because I'm certainly not an early adopter of the factory pattern. The factory pattern has been around for a hot minute. I can't say when in the timeline of design patterns emerging into the space it came along, but I will say that it is one of the first ones that I learned right after the decorator, actually. And it is incredibly useful because it allows you to substitute objects in your code without having to redeploy or reconfigure a bunch of things. The basic rundown of it is that you replace a class instance with a factory class method. So it would actually be a static class or some sort of non-tracked object that then has some sort of create method. Now this is going to go through interfaces specifically. So these are the non-instantiable definitions of what an object should be. If you think of it like a ship or a car versus maybe an airplane or something like that, they could all have this same method of move or transport or carry or something like that. Full disclosure, I am also borrowing the example of the factory pattern from refactoring gurus. Shout out to them. Every object that goes through the factory pattern has to implement the same base interface. So maybe it is iVehicle or iTransporter or something along those lines. But you have maybe an airplane, a car, and a ship, and each of those have the same methods and the same properties that are defined in the interface. If they're not defined in the interface, they're not accessible to anything referencing them. But because we are swapping out the instances of plane, car, and boat or ship with the interface, we can use the factory method to determine at runtime which one we want to use, which one is the best way to go about transporting whatever the data is, the goods, whatever, right? The very fact that they all have to inherit or implement the exact same interface means that they must be like-minded or like-focused objects. You're not going to have a canteen and a battle droid in the same product space, unless it's very generic, like iProduct or iLine item or something along those lines. Which is actually a valid use case if you're building something like a point of sale or an e-commerce website or platform or something along those lines. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter whether that's a product or a line item, or in our original analogy, a ship, airplane, or car. We're swapping those concrete instances in order to allow the system to choose the best one based on other criteria. And in your factory create or factory generator class or whatever, you can call the create or generate or get method, whatever you want to call it, to take in whatever arguments or whatever criteria necessary in order to return the most applicable or the best option for what you need. It allows you to use generic code across the board and swap those modules in at any time. Which actually brings me to the next really powerful use case for a factory, and one of the biggest benefits of it is that now it doesn't matter if you're working with an airplane, a ship, or a car. Maybe you decide to add on another transporting option, maybe light rail or space travel or instantaneous teleportation. Doesn't matter. If there's a way to transport, if it implements iTransporter, then it can implement it however it wants to. The factory returns the best one based on whatever criteria you set. It also allows you to follow best coding practices and maintain the solid principles by disallowing you from binding two namespaces together semantically, which is a very difficult thing to troubleshoot and get out of for mitigating your tech debt, which if you're new around here, tech debt kills systems very quickly and very unexpectedly, even though it should be very expected. It's a common death knell in a system that is sometimes not even all that old. So I may not be explaining it super well overall, but I do recommend you look into the factory pattern. It has gotten me out of more than one bind in my code, and it has allowed me to remain pretty flexible. This is one of those that pretty easily can be integrated with the decorator. It can also be integrated fairly decently with the builder, and if you're really adventurous, you could probably combine the three. Though, as I said before, it is easy to overdo it on design patterns and hyper-saturate or oversaturate your code base with these code patterns or these design patterns without meaning to. And complexity for the sake of complexity is stupidity. Don't make something complex just so you can make it complex. Sometimes complexity is necessary, and it's actually more of an inherent drawback to pretty much any system. Most systems, if they need to be complex, they're complex enough. Let's fight for simplicity here and make our lives a little bit easier moving forward. And if it's not for us, make it easier for the next guy, because they don't need that stress either. Let's take care of each other. So that's the factory pattern in a nutshell. And I recommend you play with it, because until you actually play with it and find use cases that could leverage that very powerfully, you're gonna probably struggle to understand it, unless you really do understand abstraction, which is not an easy thing, so good on you. But that's it for this one. And I think I've got one or two more that I'm going to put up here. If you want me to go over each of the design patterns, let me know. I'm happy to give them in a nutshell, but it's hard to do on this particular app. So if you want to see more in longer videos, maybe implementations and things like that, let me know, and I will look at uploading them to another platform, perhaps one with a red logo with the words "you" and maybe even the word "tube" in there. Let me know. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. Thanks. Have a good one.